Everything flows from your identity. A lot of people are wanting to change the habit. They're wanting to change the behavior. You want to quit smoking? Say you're a non-smoker. Don't say I quit smoking, because it literally just takes this point of reference that I am a smoker. My identity is still a smoker, but I quit. Pulling a rubber band of a behavior away from the identity. I've made it for 2 days. I've made it for 2 weeks. I've made it for 2 months. I've made it for 2 years. Oh, and then stress happens and I need to reaffirm my identity again. And it just snaps back. This is the self-sabotage everybody talks about. It's not self-sabotage. You're not changing your identity.
Welcome to the Minds Unleashed show with your host, Eric. Join him on the journey where we explore transformative ideas, confront challenges, and discover new perspectives. Together, let's elevate the mindset and transform your personal and business success. So whether you're seeking motivation, practical advice, or a fresh perspective, you've come to the right place. Join Eric on the Minds Unleashed show, and let's dive in together to empower your mind and unleash freedom.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Minds Unleashed show. I'm your host, Eric. As always, if you get value out of this, please share this podcast with a friend. And don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and leave us a review. I truly appreciate it. Let's get into today's show. I'm so grateful to introduce you to today's guest, Payton. Kara is an expert in nervous system and subconscious reprogramming. She's also an author, podcaster, and anxiety coach. Welcome to the show, Kara.
Thanks for having me, Eric. It's good to be here.
Awesome. It's a pleasure to have you here as well. I wanted to kind of start off with, I really want to understand where your mindset and your philosophy of happiness comes from, in terms of when you said you had this Mercedes, this white picket fence, this house, the money, the children.
Oh, my mindset back then, or are you talking about kind of like the big...
Really like that mindset and philosophy of like, why did you think you defined happiness as having all of those things back then?
I think it was just like everyone else, where we assumed the getting and the attaining of the external stuff would fill the internal stuff. I was no different than anybody else. I grew up not having it. And so I saw what not having money did to my parents and assumed, okay, the attainment of money solves all of those things. And so I was none other than just a product of, okay, drag and drop. This is what was missing. So this is what I will chase.
That's very fair. I think a lot of children do see that growing up, right? They see their parents struggling financially, especially today, it could be struggling even more. And you think that money will solve all of your problems because, you constantly hear your parents probably fighting about money, or they can't afford to fix the water heater. You can't buy that new t-shirt. So I guess outside of like just seeing your, family struggle financially, did you have any people that might have influenced you, like telling you like, you got to have, the luxury car and the house and that will make you happy? Or you just kind of was a byproduct of kind of seeing your family struggle?
That's a good question. I think it was the introduction of the smartphone and social media, just like everybody else. I didn't really know before the smartphone, the internet, social media, all of that. I only could compare myself to the people in my own neighborhood block or the people in my school or whatever. So it's a very small sample pool. And I definitely assumed that I was doing relatively well in the grand scheme of things. So it wasn't until the introduction of the whole world, the whole city, that I knew that I was definitely maybe in an average pool of 1 to 100 people. I was doing relatively well, but 1 to 2.8 million people in the Kansas City area, I was like, I'm not doing so hot. So let's start chasing, let's start climbing, and then even opening up the what to want, what is appropriate to what should my wants be, and until that point, I was pretty content with just the idea of getting married, having kids, having the 2.8 kids, building a house and kind of just picking up knitting someday. I didn't know. It wasn't until it was these cars and these trips and these jobs and these people and these status groups and these that I started to kind of become unhappy and chasing happiness it was like chasing your tail. Chasing happiness was absolutely the cause and the root of my unhappiness. Plot twist.
Right. No, I definitely believe that that is, very true. I think I feel a very similar way. I think, growing up, I saw my own parents struggle, right? And so when you see that struggle and you see the stress and the anxiety that it causes, you realize that, money might, kind of solve that happiness.
I was going to add that growing up, watching the turmoil that happened with the lack of it, and then seeing the introduction of social media and almost being affirmed that money buys X, Y, and Z, it inverted on itself where I also added to that belief system that because they were these people and had and these people and did not have, I took a valuation of the worth dynamics of certain people. Certain people were better than others. And growing up, because my dad was a good person and was working hard, was breaking his back multiple shifts, etc., he was a good person and he didn't have it. I then also associated and synonymized people that do have it as not so good. So lots of interesting little webs that were woven in my formative years.
No, I totally understand that. So, kind of, reflecting, right now, how would you now define what happiness looks like? Because it sounds like it's changed, obviously.
Very much so. It has nothing to do with happiness, actually. Uh, Happiness very much, well, the iteration of the typical things that you can say is happiness is a choice and happiness is a habit and all of that stuff. Coincidentally, the name of my podcast in 2020, because that seemed to be the predominant Google search that I could find anybody looking for, is people just want to be happy. The problem is happiness is subjective for everyone. What does happiness look like to you? Well, happiness is finding this or attaining that or achieving this. And it doesn't have any linear commonality other than this fleeting feeling we've defined as something we would hope to catch every once in a while. And sustaining it, that's more your practice of joy and gratitude and the things that are intrinsic. But the intrinsic stuff, it's interesting how our brains work and how we work socially, is that nobody's interested in the intrinsic lifelong stuff. Really, at the end of the day, if you tell somebody you can have this car, this money, this guy, this status, this popularity, this whatever, this social influence, all of that stuff, you can have that now. Or you can bypass that and you can have a sustained amount of joy throughout your life all the way to the end. Most people in today's capacity will choose the instant gratification, the dopamine hit, the happiness part, to live a life long, maybe not as glitzy, maybe not as huge, maybe not as instant gratifying, maybe not as big and flashy. And most people, younger generations, we're in this tipping point too, because the older generation, we were into the lifelong sustainability. This middle generation, we're like, hell with that. I want what I can have now. And then all the way up to not a generation that's been defined yet, but not Z, but the one that's coming, whatever that'll end up being. We've got Gen Z. I don't know what the hell we're doing next. But that generation, the younger one, I'm watching the unsustainable quality to all this social media and the cyberbullying and all this divisive polarity that social media is lighting a fire to. I'm wondering how the pendulum is going to correct itself. So I'm curious, and I have a lot of hope for the generation to come that is our children and our children's children right now. So I'm hopeful, but happiness definitely is just one of the emotions that is nothing more than a chemical in the brain that we intentionally try to flick loose in our chemical cocktail up there, but definitely not as valuable as it used to be.
I love the chemical cocktail. That's a great phrase on how to describe it, because there's so many different components going into that. And one day the cocktail could taste great. The next day that cocktail, you might want to spit it out. So, um, And I was reading a book recently that talked about kind of like this having versus being. And it's interesting because if you're having these things, you're operating at a lower level of having the car, the money, the house, the kids, whereas being is you're operating from a place of gratitude, love, caring, being open and honest. And it really kind of opened my eyes to, what you've, kind of experienced, which is you are going to be happy if you become the right person, not if you have all these things. And you can even see it with, celebrities, sports players. I'm a big sports fan, and you can see it even with, across the spectrum of those people.
I would have to agree in my experience and observations of people that what I find is that after they're done with the chasing, when it comes to that critical mass where we no longer realize this can't be maintenance, this can't be sustained. There is a point and a pivot where people will reach where they're like, okay, I need something longer lasting than the quick flash sugar rush of happiness. What is more sustainable? So instead of eating the candy, we're eating the protein, and chemically was speaking. And so beyond happiness, I found what the key component was is people, we kind of want a very few, most of us want a very few things. And the intrinsic quality that I talk about when we can't push joy and peace and all of that down people's throats, people want to feel fulfilled. They want to know that their lives mean something, that they've made some sort of impact, and that they're doing better today than they were yesterday. Because to know that you're making progress, to know that you can do something about where you are is the ultimate killer of depression. If you are having a crap day and you've had a series of crap days, however, you can somehow on some infinitesimal scale see that a week ago you were doing a lot worse than you're doing now, and that you've made incremental differences, that you were able to impact your own life. Depression cannot creep in on a brain like that can put those two things together. I'm in a bad place, but I'm capable of creating change. Depression is caused by being in a bad place and making it permanent and pervasive. This is going to be this way, and this is exclusive to me. This is going to stay this way, and it's exclusive to me. Depression is not being where you want to be and feeling like you can do nothing to affect it. So that same token on ourselves is not being able to do anything about the state of the world or making an impact on others. Do I matter? Do I mean something to other people? If I were to disappear, does it mean anything to other people? And then, did I create something within myself or out in the world or whatever, where it be relationships, job? Some people focus on career, they focus on the relationship, they focus on themselves, their health, they focus on others, they have a grander plan. Are they fulfilled in that? And even Tony Robbins talks about that. After working with him for a lot of years, he always brought it back to the art of fulfillment, feeling fulfilled and doing what fulfills you. And it has nothing to do with the dependency on making sure that our, neurotransmitters are constantly getting fed some, again, the chemical cocktail of what I can attain by doom scrolling and flash pan romances and dating apps and social media clickbait and all of that stuff.
Listening to you talk about this, like you sound like so strongly like towards these topics. Like, why do you feel so much like compassion towards talking about these kinds of things?
Unfortunately, I walked very, very, very far away from probably the furthest point that you can get from something that looks like fulfillment or happiness. I was suicidal. I had no interest, just blatantly no interest in anything that life could offer me. I had gotten myself to the point where I was resigned to the state of my health, resigned to the state of my relationships, resigned to the state of my career. And not only did I not feel that I could make an impact on those things, I didn't even care to. I was so lethargic about the entire idea of lifting a finger to create change, because every single thing that I felt that I had done up to that point was so ineffectual. I woke up in a state of apathy that I couldn't shake. So to know where that stuckness and what that stuckness feels like and where it sits in your gut and how strong it can be. And it gains on us. When we stop running, there's a lot in this world that if we don't keep fighting the good fight, are so quick to take over. We think we have all of these battles against, money and friends, and we are not fighting against those battles. We are very much fighting a spiritual battle. We are fighting the battle for our mind and our souls every single day. And if we stop, if we give up, if we get apathetic, even for a day, there are things that seek, kill, and destroy all of our happiness, all of our joy, all of our fulfillment. And it will tempt us with the quick flash burn stuff that doesn't sustain us, because it knows there's almost this malevolent spirit behind the things that seek to claim us, because it is so, I'm a Nazi with my words. I like to use very, very carefully calculated words, but there is very much a purpose in a soul being defeated as far as the battle between good and evil. There is a reason and a purpose and a victory in every soul that gives up and every single one that wins. But there's so much of a personal advocacy that needs to happen, that once you're depressed, if you're suicidal, if you've just lost one too many times in life and you just don't feel like it that day, it's a slippery slope. And both entities that are, I guess we'll say, the king of that know this. And it's so easy to, we went deep and heavy really quickly, but I'll shovel my way back to the top of that hill. But it's so easy to just give up. Life is hard. Life is hard.
Yeah, and I say what that, statement because I listened to several of your previous episodes on plenty of other podcasts, and listening to it, like that was like the almost like conviction. Like I could hear it in your voice and like the way that you spoke, because there was one episode I would definitely shout out, like on Papa Ron's podcast, where he just dug through every single detail of your story. And so like you pretty much went to like the depths of hell, it sounds like, mentally and spiritually. And the fact that you were there is like you now can like walk hand in hand with somebody else that's in those depths and pretty much take them on the mountain or the ladder climbing to the light, right? Because now that's where you're at now. And so not many people have been through the shit that you've been through, and I don't think you would wish those experiences upon anybody else. And to find somebody that can also talk to you and empathize with you and feel the things that you felt is something that not many people are going to get to experience. So that's why, and I was listening to you right now and I was like, yeah, I feel the same. You can feel the sense of, strength that you've, had to truly develop on your own.
Well, I appreciate that. It speaks a lot to the audacity of the human spirit because there's when you are in a spiral, whether you're just a little bit down, or you've lost a child, you're getting divorced, you've lost a job, you got a health diagnosis, somebody else you love has gotten a health diagnosis. There are certain little hijack points in the mind that can spiral you, almost like you got trapped at the bottom of a well. And what I hope to impart on anyone listening to any of the episodes is, in the bottom of that well, it's almost a trick that your brain plays on you. It's real. We're very real in it. We're really in that struggle. It feels like we're going insane. There's so many dark places that we all can go that feel so absolutely formidable that we can't even get up. There's people that cannot get out of bed that day, even though they are physically fully functional. They are capable of getting out of the bed, but their brain has tricked them and talked them into believing that they do not have the strength. As somebody loses their child to suicide, there's no point. in anything, and everything has gone gray. There's colorlessness. There's not even that. They feel like their heart is physically in pain. And it's what's wild is that we believe this and we state this over and over and over. And you know what? Our body goes, okay, pain. Send the markers and the signals for pain. Experience physical pain. Our brain is such an asshole because it will absolutely follow all of our commands no matter what, except for give me the dopamine when I say it. It's like, do you want to feel good? Do you want to feel good? Go for a run. Like, no, that's not how it works. But if we wanted to feel bad, our brain will shoot us chemicals all day long. Like, let's do that. And when you're at the bottom of a well, say you're in a spiral, a suicidal spiral, you're in an episode, you're having a bad day, your mind's racing, you cannot get a hold of yourself. You are in something that has already programmed itself to be like that. It has nothing to do with reality. And that's what's so, it almost feels like you're gaslighting or insulting the experience of somebody because they feel that it's real. The crazy part is you have to somehow get them to back up from that and question it enough to see for themselves that it's not real. You want to tell somebody at the top of a bridge that's about to jump that none of their shit is real? You might as well push them. However, if you can validate them, if you can sit with them fully committed that that's real, and then because you've then imparted yourself into their reality, and then only then can you overturn stones and go, is that really a brick? Is that really monumental? Is that really a death sentence? Is that really permanent? Is that really about you? Is that really what that means? Because when you're in survival, it's like trying to look for your keys in the house. I've got my keys right here, so I'll use that. Your keys are in the kitchen. Your inner sense of resourcefulness, your inner sense of ability to reflect and creatively dissect something. Because when we're determined, when we're depressed, when we're suicidal, when we're angry, when we're in a crap place, we've decided. We've already decided. There's no keys in the house anywhere. No sense. There's no point. But our higher sense of self, not the amygdala, but our prefrontal cortex, our higher sense of self, sees the keys in every room, no matter where it is. It has the ability to have that refractory period where it can bounce back. And it doesn't matter if you get depressed. It matters if you can bounce back. The problem is when you're in survival mode. This is what the brain does. And this is where people get suicidal. This is how suicidal gets so quickly ramped up in somebody's, it doesn't take very much encouragement. It's because when you're in a survival mind, your inner house, your brain, locks all the doors between all the rooms. You're in survival now. All of the faculties have been shut down. Your normal function, your creative function, your love function, all of the things that would do everything that's up here is now shut off. So the keys are in the house, but you're stuck in the living room or in the basement. You're not getting to the kitchen. All the doors are locked. So you have to literally find yourself going down to somebody's basement with them and going, is that door really locked? Wow, this is a dark basement. This sucks. Yeah, I can see all of that. I can see why you're seeing this. I can see why you're feeling this. I would too. I've been there. And that's the most powerful thing you can say is, this sucks, without explaining it away. And then, is that door really locked? What would it look like if that door wasn't locked? That's cool. What would it look like if you could climb up the stairwell? There was one time I climbed up the stairwell. I lost a child. I lost my mom. I went through this. I filed bankruptcy. I went through divorce. I lost everything. And then I went through a stairwell. You want to know how I did it? This is how I did it. Is this true? Is it really true? Can you know it to be true? Who do you become when you believe the thought? Who would you be without it? What do you want things to look like? So, long-winded way of getting around to, there's so much empathy and so much potential for people in their mind that they don't have the capacity to know, especially when they're there. So my greatest hope for anyone is to teach them that that entire area of the human experience can be practiced. You can prepare for those moments. You can arm yourself with, first of all, knowing that every experience you have is valid and everyone goes through it, maybe to different depths and different lengths and different extremities. There are experiences I have never had that I am grateful that I've never had. And there's experiences people that I've had that people are grateful they've never had. And I had to learn that I'm going to fall down in that basement a lot until I fall less often. And I wanted to never go into the basement again. Luckily, I've not. I've learned how to go into the basement and go, I'm not suicidal. I'm just stuck. I'm programmed. I'm not stuck. This is a very, very well-worn habit, of a mental habit. And when you can go in there, it's almost like you have this dark basement, but you've got a flashlight. Like, I don't know where the keys are right now, and damn it, they feel a long way away, but I've got a flashlight and inner resourcefulness, and I can refer to myself and do the practices I need to do, because you're not always going to have somebody there in a moment, in an episode, in an angry moment, in a suicidal moment. You're going to have yourself, though. So the way that you talk yourself through those things is vital and sometimes life-saving.
There's going to be nothing better that comes out of this episode except what she just said. So, are you gonna? I'll clip that for you. You can send that to Tony Robbins. Tell him to get you on your stage. Have you ever done like in-person events with people who are kind of gone through similar experiences with you? Because like I feel like you could be super powerful for them, because maybe they need that physical presence to. I mean, you just literally described like I was playing like Clue or, solving a puzzle. And like, I literally could like envision myself like in the basement, it's dark. I got my flashlight. Where's the keys?
I've done in-person events. I worked with Tony through events, and I toured with him from around 2015 up until like the pandemic when all the events went virtual. And I've done events here and there. I don't think anything like an intervention that you're talking about, nothing that extreme yet, but I would definitely be open to it. I have a huge heart for people that struggle with those kinds of things, particularly our single moms and our veteran community. They're amazing human beings, and they're getting a little bit of a raw deal from society. So
why is the veteran community like so important to you?
In 2021, I lost my brother to suicide. And he was we'll say covered. We'll say he was covered. He had the therapy, he had the medication, he was doing retreats. To our assessment, to my limited assessment, he was going to be fine. And I'll never forget the day that my sister called me and told me that her husband had taken his life at 3:00 in the morning the previous day. And it flipped a switch, because if he was so supported, and if people who loved him, all up and down, mother that would have done anything for him, kids, my sons absolutely adored him. Uncle Chad, Uncle Chad, Uncle Chad. He was so loved and so supported, and he still fell through the cracks. So that tells me that the cracks are more like canyons, and we're not doing what we can for our veteran community. And they are going through experiences every day that they think, and a lot of places probably know, that we can never relate to, and they don't want to burden us with them. And they've been used to manning up and focusing on the assignment and relying on their friends who are also dying one by one, and hoping that their friend list outlasts their life so that they don't give up. And it's not even, I use that word give up very, very poorly, because it's not a matter of giving up. Most of these veterans don't have a self-hatred. They have many things to live for. They have many relatives they know love them. They're not selfish. And I will go toe to toe with anybody that says suicide is selfish. You're not in the state to be thinking of yourself or others in those moments. You're exhausted. You're exhausted and you feel like you're burdening people with stuff that they cannot understand. And sometimes you know how uncovered you are and how much left, because we're the only person that knows the depths of the pain that we're experiencing. So you might go into a therapy office and you might, take a little off the top. And then you have medication that takes a little bit off the top. And you get together with your guy friends and you take a little off the top. And you drink a handle of whiskey and it takes a little off the top. And you have a little bit of an adrenaline at your work and you get to take a little bit off the top. But there is so much more that's not being dealt with. And so when you have to wake up every single day and do all of these things just to take a little bit off the top to make sure you can get through and survive until noon, and then you hear a sudden sound or your son screams or something sets you off and you go into any number of night terrors or triggers or having these horrendous flashbacks thinking that this is permanent and there's not enough help for me. And some of these people, when they have an episode, they set off or they have a violent thing, or even just the night terrors. Some of those are very, very scary for their family to go through. And they just do the math in their head and they're like, this would all be easier if they didn't have to deal with me. I'm tired of doing this every single day just to survive. They're just tired. They're not bad people. They're not selfish people. They're wonderful people that don't know how to acclimate from the most horrific places and the things that they've seen, and worse, the things that they've been asked to do. And they have to come back here after being whatever they've labeled themselves, a murderer, a horrible person, a monster, and then they have to come back and be daddy or husband or son or brother. There's no part of us that's covering that transition. I don't care what country we're in, we're leaving them to fall into these canyons. And if it's not the canyon of the VA that's not covering them, it's the canyon of the fact that we don't understand how to help them in therapy. We're not doing enough because traditional medicine doesn't allow us for psychedelics and ASMR and the things that will actually, or the MDMR. I don't know that one. I haven't gone into psychedelics studies very, very deeply. We're not doing the things that have actually been proven to help with extreme post-traumatic stress disorder. We're not implementing it in the mass-produced medicines and the mass-produced availabilities that we're giving with these therapies. These therapies are talk therapy. And the problem with talk therapy with veterans, and I'll wrap it up with this, is that you're taking someone who's been through horrible things and you're asking them to sit and talk about it and relive it for an hour, where your limbic system does not know space and time. It does not know that it's reliving it again. And so you're putting him back in the survival state, in this horrible state, and then you're saying, okay, next week, don't forget your meds, where the medicine, all that it's doing is an SSRI, takes the top of your emotional spectrum and the bottom of your emotional spectrum and gets rid of it. So you feel nothing but a zombie in the middle. And you're telling him to relive it. And every single week, he's retelling the story so well that he's re-injuring himself mentally. No wonder we're losing all of them to suicide. The ones that make it through, it's a miracle. It's no wonder that all of them don't off themselves after battle at coming here and trying to acclimate to this ridiculously little big box store, Amazon, social media disaster we've created about life now. It's like, when they do make it, it's like, you are a freaking tyrant and I want to study you.
You've articulated like these concepts of like what they've gone through. There's nobody in my family besides my grandfather that was in the military, to my knowledge. And so like to truly understand like what they went through, the mental struggles, the problems, and the person they have to become is like, you've done such a great job of that. And so like, what I guess like my next question is like, what is the solution almost? Like what can be done, right? Are we still in like that trial and error of just trying to figure it out, and each case and each person is, a completely different answer?
A little bit of everything, actually. Each person is very different and unique in their own way because they have their own stories, their beliefs, their dynamics. The things that they've boxed themselves into, their brain has boxed themselves into, is all different. However, we're all human beings. And while the brain is vast and amazing, it is also a very, very, very old computer that runs the same programming for everyone. So it's just how it's been programmed. Some have a little bit more virus, some have a little bit more things to work through than others. And I do believe that I am a firm believer, and I will say this unapologetically, is I believe that the system that we have now sucks and is ineffectual at best. And it's dismally run and dismally cared for. And we are discarding these people as a non-priority. And the VA is hopelessly corrupt and hopelessly incapable of supporting them in the way that they need to. Traditional talk therapy is also in the same camp of those people. I do not believe that talk therapy does a damn thing for somebody who's trying to heal. I believe that talk therapy is effectual for sorting something that happened. Say you have a trauma. Talk therapy is good for a resource for someone to sort out what happened to you. The facts, getting them on paper, because our mind does a lot of things to delete and distort things that happen to us. This is what our brain is designed to self-preserve. And so whatever it needs to delete and whatever it needs to have trauma, you have to have a malevolent theory of what happened. And so we create all of that stuff. I'll use a personal example of something that I found that should have been traumatic in my life. I was landing from a flight back home to Kansas City, and I had a repressed memory pop up. Just surfaced. No faces. I knew it was me, but I didn't know who was the other party. And I had been sexually abused in this memory. And it was interesting because I looked at it like it was almost like when you get mail to your house that's not addressed to you. It was that same kind of confusion of, I don't really know that this belongs to me. So I closed my eyes and I almost kind of refilled it and made it replay again. And it was definitely me, definitely my body, and definitely the feeling and sensation I had in my body was definitely presenting itself. This was a memory and not just some random flash vision. However, upon picking it apart, understanding that if this was a memory, this should have affected me very, very adversely. I should have had, psychotic episodes, or this sexual relationship with sex that's very unhealthy, or a distrust of men, or some sort of trauma result, something that showed. And I realized that I was at the time, I'm 30, 34, 35, healthy human being with no such, we'll say mental, emotional, physical bruising to look for. And so I knew I had the opportunity to decide, what does this mean then? I had this repressed memory. This happened to me. And trauma has to be too much, too soon, too fast, too often. None of those markers happened. So trauma, it was an event that happened, not a traumatic event that happened, an event that happened. It didn't traumatize me. Okay, so if that's the case, then an event we can label as traumatic doesn't necessarily traumatize all of us. There are people that have been raped and are not traumatized by it. There are people that have seen someone die or be murdered and not be traumatized by it. Why? If trauma is a guarantee and these mental dysfunctions are a guarantee, then why isn't it affecting every single person who goes through said event? It's the brain, it's the person, it's the decisions, it's the stories we tell about it inside of that event. Trauma is not what happens to you, it's what you've decided about it. Gabor Mate or Gabor Mate says the same thing. The things that occurred inside of your brain as a result of that event, that's the trauma. It's separate from the event. So to fast forward to these veterans, if they can decide that they're now, we'll say, for lack of a better, most of the time, the veterans that I've talked to, the language they use is, I'm fucked up. If they're not all fucked up, because of something that happens. Or you can talk to a vet that went through the same deployment, same operation. Two guys right next to each other had the same experience, but they came out different people. One's a hopeless alcoholic who is we'll call it, he is a self-proclaimed bane on everyone's existence. He can't keep a job. He can't do this. He's addicted to God knows what. And he attempted suicide twice. And the guy next to him manages just fine. Why? That why cannot be accounted for with traditional talk therapy, with medication, with what the VA is offering these people. And what they're offering people is a promise that they'll be on a wait list that's 6 to 8 weeks long when it's actually 2 to 3 years long and they're still waiting for no treatment. So we are entering into an awareness of that, which is amazing. We're actually looking at the brain's function upstream of these events that occurred. How is the mind set up? How are the chemicals of the mind predisposed? What else is going into the picture here? And of this event, downstream, what decisions and things were happening, and how can we unlock and facilitate higher and higher levels of personal self-advocacy, self-referencing, self-healing, we'll call it, I don't want to say self-medicating, self-soothing. That's not even the right word. I'm fumbling for words here, but that kind of that self-nurturing, we'll say nurturing is a better word, that they can do that is self-sustaining. And it has brought into things that pull them out of a state. When we're talking about psychedelics, I know very, very little about it. I can't talk about it at length, but what I will say is it's putting people into a state where they're in a state that does separate them from the event. They are almost forced into a state to look at it very, very objectively, as opposed to being stuck in the story, stuck in the identity, stuck in the events that happened and occurred, with all the labels and the definitions already there. They're not locked in they're basically, it's like the way that I understood when it was explained to me is that psychedelics in that house analogy that I was talking about, it gives them almost this bird's eye view of the house itself, where the keys are, where they are, where the story is, where all the locks are, and even kind of a different understanding of the events. And so after they come out, they understand that they have autonomy over these things. And moving into that awareness is where I stand. I'm completely against the way that we've been doing things. We're still losing people until we're losing a lot less and we're losing a lot more. I will stand against the way that we're doing things all day long. But I think we're in it's not going fast enough for my liking, but we're moving into a better and better place every day with actually advocating for people with severe mental illness. I don't think that these things are supposed to be terminal. I don't think PTSD is terminal. I don't think any of these things are a lifelong diagnosis at all.
Do you think, like, I could see you, kind of going back to my events in person, like, do you go to like the VAs in either your local or, other cities to kind of talk to some of them at all, or no? Because if not, I think, you should be buying yourself one-way plane tickets to every large VA facility and trying to sneak your way in somehow if they don't let you in.
There is a little bit of a rub with someone like me having opinions like me, particularly someone who is not a PhD like me having these grand, vast opinions, is that with traditional medicine, you need to have a traditional medicine flex. And I do not have a traditional medicine flex to go, hey, I've looked through, I know what I'm talking about, and I have these things to present to you. So more often than not, I do get upturned noses and closed doors. However, that does not mean I'm going to stop. And that does not mean that people that believe the same thing as I do, also without and with PhDs, are going to stop either. I have many doctors on my side that has said, 100% whatever you need, we're here, we're going to support, we're going to underpin what you're saying because we've absolutely learned that it's true too. So nobody's stopping, but I myself get a lot more green lights than red lights, or red lights and green lights, I'll say.
That's fair. But that's awesome that you're not letting a little bit of resistance or roadblock kind of stop you. So, but Based on what you've been through, I would say this is probably very small roadblock or resistance. So
Yeah, for the meantime, while the veteran things are doing what they're doing, and while those cogs are very, very slowly moving, I'm focusing on the personal dynamic of people that just struggle with mental illness, um, solo, and maybe do not have the resources to explore it on their own. So they do look at me. They're like, "Oh, she doesn't have a PhD, and she's telling me I can do this without." I took medicine and it didn't make sense, and I went to therapy and it didn't work. So I'll listen to what she has to say.
yeah, no, that's very true. I'd love to kind of get into, you've mentioned that, you're a parent yourself. And so I'd love to understand, how is your relationship with your parents like growing up versus how is it today?
Interesting question. My relationship with my parents then was volatile, and we'll say volatile in the way that it was good conditionally and bad conditionally. And there was a lot of rules in order to maintain a connection to them that I happily obliged at the time, being codependent and growing up with just unhealthy functions that were displayed as normal, because when you don't have another household to compare it to, it all feels normal. It wasn't until growing up and realizing, being able to contrast the difference between, say, my aunt and uncle's house and my own house, and spending more time there as I got older, and spending time in other people's homes, where I was like, oh, families are not all the same. Moms don't all act the same. Dads don't all act the same. That is particularly harmful. That's a plus side. That's something that they do that other parents don't. And I didn't have a very good sample pool, so for a while, I took it hook, line, and sinker, and developing the superpower of critical thought, that ended up kind of being a little bit of a death blow to some of their abilities to manipulate or control or influence me, toward each other. I was used as bait for a lot of their divorce arguments. As children, were used as leverage and fodder and trading, bartering capacity. There was just a lot of chaos. I grew up in a lot of chaos, and it wasn't until having children of my own that I kind of decided, okay, I have the ability to continue chaos. I have the autonomy over my own household. And it was such a interesting thing, because it was like playing pretend for a long time. It's like, how do I want to raise my children? That is completely my decision. And, when you're 20 something years old with your first child, or, 24, 25 with your second child, you're like, you're literally going to let me leave with this thing, and I'm totally in charge of whether it lives or dies. And nobody's got anything else to say, like no paperwork, no nothing, no warranty, no receipts. I'm just able to leave with this 8-pound meatloaf, and you guys trust me. Okay. It was very liberating to know that I'm an adult. It was the simplest thought in my head, like, I'm an adult. To the world, I am an adult, and I can do whatever I want within the limits of law. But other than that, I can do whatever I want. And I got to craft. I went into this very creative mode of like, how does my household look to me, feel to me, and what things do I need to do to create that? And even more so after my divorce, I was like, now I don't have to collaborate with anybody else. How do I want this to? Because divorce doesn't have to mean the end or doom or bad. Because my parents, when they divorced, it was all every little semblance of normalcy or wholeness or functionality. When my parents divorced, that was all out the window, and it was just Lord of the Flies all over the place. I was 16 getting drunk with my mom and her friends in the house. I mean, it was insane. So divorce was also another invitation to almost rebel against norms and what was expected. And my life now with my children now is so much fun and so good to be in this house. I feel so blessed. My kids are the sweetest people ever, and we have so much fun together, and I actually enjoy my children. And one, is 18. By all rules and regulations, I should think he's an asshole by now, and I love him to pieces. So my relationship with my family, or my parents now, unfortunately, is a little bit more spaced out, just due to the nature of when you're in close proximity with something, it influences you. And I want less influence. They still live relatively the same lives that they've lived for since I've been raising my own kids for the last 20 years. Their lives, dynamics, mindsets, beliefs, habits, identities, stories about haven't changed much. And mine have changed drastically just since last year. So to keep that going, space was necessary. And so, yeah, I've distanced myself a little.
So have you like tried, or I mean, I've got to imagine you've thought about it, like trying to get them to maybe change those thoughts, beliefs, values, and it's probably very hard, I would imagine, but have you, it seems like you've at least tried. Maybe it sounds like maybe you've been unsuccessful, but how did you go about that, I guess, is my curiosity.
Probably like anybody else trying to change anyone else. I remember buying my mother a ticket to a Tony Robbins event, knowing that those events are, $1,300 for a ticket, and I was willing to just hand it over to her. And it was by the time she gave me the fifth excuse of why she couldn't go, even though it was paid for, that I realized, there's you can't change somebody else here. Like, you can't. There's just no changing someone. I thought if I loved her more, that would do the trick. And so I remember a Mother's Day just wanting to lay out the red carpet. I had closed down Tiffany & Co. shop at the plaza on Mother's Day for her to go to one glass case and find her gift. I wanted a whole grand presentation of her be able to go in a dark Tiffany store and find one case that's illuminated. And I don't even remember what she said, but it was something to the effect of it being made a big deal of, and it was embarrassing and all of that. So I decided to let it be what it is. And similar to my dad, we had made amends of other sorts. We were in a good place, had communicated better than we had over a conversation that actually went very well. And I didn't answer the phone during dinner on a Tuesday. And because I didn't answer the phone that one time, we were in a bad place again. So when I realized that there was nothing that I could do to please a father or a mother, there's nothing I'm going to be able to do or not do. At first it was defeating, because I'm like, there's literally nothing I'm going to do that's ever going to be good enough. And then I paused and corrected my language and said, no, Kara, it's not that you'll never be able to do anything that's good enough. You separate, them separate, will never be able to please a person who cannot be pleased. So you're free. And I was free. I felt free. Like, this means I don't have to try anymore, because there's no purpose. We try for something we think that we'll attain. We hope to attain. When there's no hope, it's kind of freeing. If it's hopeless, it's hopeless. So drop it. And that's the meaning I chose to make. But I definitely, I got to the crossroads and started to do the little kid thing. I'm never going to be good enough for my parents. And then I thought, no, I'm never going to be good enough for my parents. So give up and go live life. And it was a very, very odd moment, but very good moment. That's not something most find celebratory worthy.
Yeah, so I guess, if you have seen a friend, or you maybe are coaching somebody who is in that similar position where their parents are not operating on that belief and value system and that same mindset of yourself, what advice would you give to that friend, struggling with those parents, outside of maybe trying to hopefully free yourself and realizing that maybe they can't be pleased out, you know, is there anything outside of that you would recommend?
Well, first I would tell them to mind their business, but knowing that that would need context, and also mind your business, mind your own damn business. With when it comes to trying to change someone else, someone that you love, even someone that you love especially, mind your own damn business. But that's not going to work because we don't. We meddle and we cross into other territories and try to fix things. So what I would do then is I would explain that this is codependent behavior by explaining what a boundary is and what a boundary is not. So a boundary is not for other people, first of all. A lot of people say, you know, let's scrub the language. Boundaries are not for other people. They're not designed for others. They're your own personal self-government. They're your laws. They're your laws that identify the you and the not you. So think of them like a border. And if you want to make yourself like a country, like my border, this is where I end, right here. This is where I end, and this is the not me. If you were chest to chest with me right now, there is a border that makes me me and you. There's me and not me. To have that clearly marked is vital to every relationship you'll ever have. Because in my world, in my country, beyond in this border, there's a set of laws and a set of standards, a set of values, a set of beliefs. If I'm Kara, say Kara's America. America has its values and standards and belief systems and laws. We have the way we run things within that country. Outside of that country, it could be totally lawless. It could be totally the opposite, the exact opposite. So somebody's laws and somebody's laws, they're not going to be the same. But you wouldn't be able to know that because if there's no boundary between them, there's no border between them, you need to know where you are in order to know what to believe, what laws to uphold, etc. So if my law is that I don't cuss, well, okay, that's not even believable. I don't do drugs. My laws is that I do not do drugs. So I'm not going to permit someone to cross over into my country, to cross over into my world or my life or my home and do a lot of drugs. But if that's not firm, if that's not a firm value and a belief that I uphold no matter what, I'm going to allow an addict in my life that may struggle with it. And I haven't made it clear because the boundary for myself will set the standards for others. So a simple one for anybody to try on, I do not do turmoil. I do not do tumultuous relationships. We'll call it drama. A lot of people call it, I don't do drama. I find the people that say they don't do drama, the ones that magnetized it like a fly on shit. So I don't do tumultuous, chaotic relationships, communication, etc. Okay, that's my boundary. So when something presents itself to me that's tumultuous, it's not going to cross. It's not going to come to me because I do not tolerate, it's against the law in my country. So then the same goes for somebody trying to fix somebody else. Their boundary, say you want to fix the way they communicate or fix the way they take care of their body, say their health, they're incredibly overweight, their doctor has told them one more heart attack and you're dead. But I go and try to fix their health, that's not part of their law system. That's not part of the beliefs or their values. Health is not a value in that country. So why would I go over there petitioning for health? I'm in somebody else's country, somebody else's turf, somebody else's mindset. I'm literally going to achieve nothing. And that's why we can't change other people. Oh, he just cheats. He cheats out, but he'll change over time. He's like, his country is lawless. It says all the cheating all day long, doesn't matter. So you want to go up to, imagine trying to get America to adopt some other world's laws. Good luck. I mean, good luck all day long because you're going to have resistance. You're going to have conflict. You're going to potentially even have war. And that's what we have when we try to change other people. It's just this conflict and turmoil and constant resistance and war. So that's how I would pull that analogy into, like, listen, think of it like you trying to go into another country and try and plant an American flag and say that free speech is going to exist here. Good luck.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely going to be a lot of resistance and definitely not going to work, at all. So I think there's definitely a case where some people want to change, right? And maybe they, start to seek you out for advice. So like, what does that first step look like on somebody that wants to change their internal like laws and governing structure? Because there's definitely people that, you know, will be, you know, we can use the cheating example as a great one, right? So, or if you've been in prison, right, you've gone to those choices, but now you're a completely different person, complete 180.
Totally. My buddy Cody Jefferson was the one actually asked this several years ago, and he gave me a good one. Um, Everything flows from your identity. Everything flows from your identity. So the piece that's missing is a lot of people are wanting to change the habit. They're wanting to change the behavior. They're wanting to change, but even the habit. It's like you want to change the behavior. People think, oh no, don't change your behavior, change your habits. Like no, upstream of that, everything flows from who you are. And so if you want to change something that you do, change who you are, you want to change the fact that you cannot get up off your ass for 3, 4, 5 months at a time. You want to quit smoking? Say you're a non-smoker. Don't say I quit smoking, because it literally just takes this point of reference that I am a smoker. My identity is still a smoker, but I quit. And if you think about it, like pulling a rubber band of a behavior away from the identity, just I've made it for 2 days, I've made it for 2 weeks, I've made it for 2 months, I've made it for 2 years. Oh, and then stress happens, and I need to reaffirm my identity again. And it just snaps back. This is the self-sabotage everybody talks about. It's not self-sabotage. You're not changing your identity. You're not going and reverse engineering this is who I am, so this is what I do. Cody Jefferson says that all the time. This is Jefferson's, and this is what Jeffersons do. It's who they are. So it's what you do. Who am I? Okay. How am I identifying her? From there, I'm an athlete. No, I'm not an athlete. I'm a podcast host. I'm a mom. I was like, no, I'm an athlete. I don't train for the Olympics. I don't do anything out there professionally in the athletic world, but I'm an athlete. So I eat like an athlete and I train like an athlete. I live my life like an athlete. There are so many things that you can change by changing the way you perceive and identify yourself. And anything that can be altered, changed, quit, started, can be started there. Put it into your identity. Instead of trying to get up for the gym, I don't have to try to get up for the gym. I'm an athlete. It's what we do. We don't skip the gym. We just don't. And if I have a day, it's not because then you're not fighting this bullshit of trying to force a habit. It's like 21 days to fix a habit. No, a habit doesn't take 21 days. It doesn't take 6 months. It doesn't take 21 weeks. It doesn't take 10 days and a half. Okay, well, it's like 10 days to flatter abs. Okay, well then what happens on day 11? A habit is something done until memorized, to where you don't have to think about it anymore. What better way than insert it into your identity so you don't even have to worry about what habits you're memorizing anymore? I don't have to worry about how many days of the week I went to the gym this week, because I'm an athlete. So if I skipped today, I didn't skip today. I didn't go. Tomorrow I'll go. Or I have it already Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I absolutely go. Or Monday, whatever I've decided is going to be my schedule. I formed it based on the identity of being an athlete. So I don't skip or go or skip or go. People are like, oh, I skipped the gym today. You skip the gym today because you don't have it born into your identity. You are still trying to force yourself into a behavior and beat yourself over the head until you have some sort of submission from the part of your brain that wants comfort. Good luck with that battle. Make it a part of your identity.
That's a great way to phrase it, and it reminds me of a quote. I'm reading a book, and it says, "What sits in mind tends to manifest." And I feel like the concept that you've described of your identity really kind of blends those two. And I would also say, I like how you chose to use identity, because you're telling yourself like, I'm an athlete, or I'm going to go to the gym. And that helps almost like program your mind to think and believe that you are that type of person. Whereas if you just look at that one day of, oh, I'm going to go to the gym, and then you don't, then the next day you're going to maybe keep telling yourself that same story. Whereas if you tell yourself, I'm going to go to the gym, or I'm going to eat healthy, or I'm going to go for a walk, you have to tell yourself of that, who that person that you're trying to become truly is. So I love the way that you phrase that.
It's a battle of emotions. And when you're doing that and you're trying to force a choice, you're consulting whether or not you feel like it. And your brain will never feel like it. You're not going to feel like it because it's hard. I don't go into the gym because I feel great. I hate it. It doesn't feel good. I go there because it's in my identity. There's no choice. I'm not consulting how I feel that day. I'm consulting who I am that day, and that's already decided. And that doesn't depend on my brain going, well, I mean, I can think of a number of reasons why I just don't want to. And there's no consulting process going on. And so it makes it so much easier. I don't really struggle with it. In fact, there's almost this reverse engineer because I am actually reaffirming who I am. And that emotionally, that chemical feels good. Every single time I get in the car, knowing I'm going there, I feel more me. I feel more affirmed in who I am. So you're not fighting this if I have to go toe to toe with my brain, I'm going to lose every time, and so is everyone else. There's nobody special or immune to that.
For sure. I don't think there's anyone that's going to win that battle. So today, you help people along their journey and you kind of guide them and heal them from that anxiety, that trauma, that abuse, that abandonment, those destructive and addictive patterns. How would you, describe or define like what it feels like to be that kind of person, and why do they kind of gravitate towards those types of, patterns and behaviors?
That's a great question. And the answer is definitely within the human condition of wanting more of the same. We're born with two needs: the need for attachment and the need for authenticity. Authenticity socially is this is who I really am and all of that. Authenticity, not socially. Authenticity is what it really means to us, to our bodies, is that when I send myself a signal, when my body sends me a signal, I listen and respond to it. If my body tells me I don't feel safe, something doesn't feel right, or I feel at ease here, or I feel open and expanded, this is good, this is bad, this is safe, this is dangerous. If I'm given a prompt within my gut, within my instincts, I don't negotiate with it. I don't dismiss it. I don't betray it. I don't discard it. That's authenticity. It's enough information if you believe something's not right about him. If you don't really feel like turning that corner, you can't explain it. Not being able to explain it doesn't matter. It's enough information. Start validating yourself. We're also born, unfortunately, and unfortunately, because it's weaponized, we're born with the need for attachment. And when we're born, we're a helpless, useless meatloaf. If we don't attach, we're not going to get our needs met. We're going to die. So our brains are hardwired to choose that need every single time. And if it comes to the crossroad of needing to be attached or authentic, we're going to choose attachment. Attachment will win every single time. The problem, where this becomes problematic, is that socially, we learn how to preserve attachment, and all it costs a lot of the time is authenticity, is ourselves. We're a toddler told to sit down and shut up and be quiet and wait your turn. No is now. Now is not the right time. We can't do that. Oh, it's too much. It's too loud. And we're threatened with detachment if we don't comply, essentially. That's, we'll say social behavior, social grooming into being part of society. It's a beautiful thing. It's the only reason we can, all agree to drive down the street and we're not in mass chaos. We've agreed that those little yellow white lines keep a 75-mile-an-hour highway realistically safe. The problem with that is that as we get into older years and this concept and these little micro decisions we make, they become self-harming. To fit into this friend group, I have to become this, believe this, say this, do this, feel this way, make fun of these people, get into this kind of trouble, whatever. Sometimes it's good because it can, if we choose to be authentic, we will find our own true peers. We find our own true friend groups. And that's great because we're ourselves and we connect with ourselves. But how often does it actually work that way? We're so willing to negotiate away and betray away and abandon ourselves for the sake of other people. A lot of the times what I've seen is that people in their most anxious place, people that come to me wanting to know how to fix all of the things that need to be fixed, all comes down to not being truthful with themselves. Anxiety is a smoke alarm in the body that says you're not looking at something. It is nothing more than pay attention to this, please. Pay attention to this, please. Pay attention to this, please. Imagine if you had a smoke alarm in your house and you were trying to suppress it and you were trying to move it to where you didn't hear it anymore. It's going off. It's telling you there's smoke. Anxiety is the smoke. The fire is what you need. The fire is the truth that's being ignited or ignored. But you have this truth lie dynamic that's going on. Where have you abandoned your truth? That's what's going to start the fire. The smoke is anxiety telling you, look at the fire. But we just decide, we take an anxiety pill. Like, I need an anxiety pill. You do not need an anxiety pill. Anxiety is your best freaking friend if you will allow it to do its job. It's going to tell you and guide you like a reliable compass all day long. But how often do we think, I have a problem with anxiety? You don't have a problem with anxiety that tells you your body works. More often than not, the people that come to me do want help with their anxiety. But the fire is their narcissistic fucking boyfriend who will not tolerate a single emotion out of her, and she has to suppress it every single day just to tolerate living in them. And she's had 2.5 years of therapy trying to figure out what's wrong with her, when the fact is there's nothing wrong with her. It's her choice in him. It's seeking the truth. It's always seeking the truth. Every single person that has ever come, with no exception, is denying some point of truth, has abandoned some form of truth, has abandoned who they are on some level. Hands over fists. That's pretty much rinse and repeat on some form or another. Man, woman, older, younger.
So what is that shift that needs to happen for somebody to move towards like authenticity and freedom? Like, what does that first step and first year look like for them to improve themselves outside of just, dumping their boyfriend?
Tiny little iterations of what could be truer than this. You don't have to necessarily, I went scorched earth. My entire life was a lie. I sold everything I owned and moved to Japan and divorced my husband and all. I mean, it was just, I had nothing. I sold everything. I was the epitome of the eat, pray, love story. I would not recommend. It's a little interesting to rebuild from the foundation and the floorboards. But to start, I would dare you to ask the things that cause you anxiety, to look at them, just to sit for a day or two. What are the areas that I have anxiety about? And then those areas, write them down and ask, what am I lying to myself about? What's not true here? What am I avoiding? What am I distracting? What am I numbing? Try to find the fire.
What do you do if you get stuck though, like trying to answer that question of like, what am I numbing or what am I lying to myself about? Like, what if you just like, you've sat on it for days or a week and you just get stuck? What happens?
Stuckness is similar to what I call the ADHD phenomena. I don't think nobody wants the truth. The truth is freedom. The truth is the qualifier. It's the uncomfortable, unflattering spotlight. Nobody wants to stand in it. To be true means you have to literally be willing to be open, exposed, wounded. People talk about vulnerability like it's the greatest thing on earth. Vulnerability is not the willingness to be open. It's the willingness to be wounded. Even if you're yourself, you're going to get hurt. So there's really not some guarantee. It's not a good life to your brain. Your brain's like, I like this familiar little, uncomfortable numb. I've got a big barrier between. So If anybody rejects this avatar that I play in the world, cool, because it's an outer exoskeleton. I can shed it and change it and all this stuff. This right here, though, the me, the little tiny core in there, I can't expose that. I don't want to expose that. So I won't. I just need to change my friend groups when my friend groups start rejecting this outer avatar, because I can change it. I can do whatever I want. But people do this all the time. They phase shift from friend group to friend group, year to year. Doesn't matter. Boyfriend to boyfriend, they change their identities. That's why you see people change so much in the relationship or lose themselves in the relationship, because it's easier. Truth is hard. Truth is not fun. Truth does not care about your feelings. Truth does not wait for you to acclimate to it. But we change our direction. We change our speed. We change all these things to kind of shapeshift to avoid it. It's like oil and water. The way that we choose to live socially and the truth is oil and water. It doesn't blend. The way that we've been taught to connect to each other requires some degree of games and bullshit. So truth often gets shelved, and it's kind of this worldwide agreement that we're all going to kind of do it a little bit. We kind of play the game. So stuckness, and I actually, that ADHD phenomena, I think that people have that when they start to get uncomfortable because truth might be getting a little closer, or a question that would lead them there starts to get a little bit sticky. You can feel it. Our insides know it. We have this internal war going on. Our gut instinct knows it's trying to constantly invite us to a more and more true and authentic version of ourselves to show up. And then we have our brain that's going, oh, hell no. We have two brains in the body, our gut and our brain. They're both doing completely opposite works. Our brain wants us comfortable. Our gut wants us realized. This wants attachment. This wants authenticity. For those, if they're not going to watch this on video, your brain wants attachment. Your gut wants authenticity. They're doing two different things. And this is why we have these microbiome, gut health. Everything's about gut health now. It's because we've spent so long suppressing these emotions into the body, and we're making our brain happy by seeking all this attachment, but we all just have this gut disorder. Everybody's got some god awful, something going on. We have gluten allergies and stuff. It's like, you might just be full of shit. You might just be living this whole facade. And so the trigger of ADHD, especially because it's rising in number, I don't actually think all of it's ADHD. One, I do think there's a lot of dietary things that are causing this content. It becomes a full contact sport in our brain to focus on any one thing because of what we're putting in our body. And it gets processed in the gut. That's not coincidence. But we also have this, we're doing all of this processing in our brain. And so when we get close to something that is anywhere near that invitation, distraction, shiny thing, we need milk, I have to poop, any kind of distraction, that presents itself as this very fragmented focus known as ADHD that presents the same way. I don't think it's that. I don't think it's ADHD, truly. I think when we get stuck, it's self-imposed in some way. Our subconscious is full of all of these little things. They're like lumps under the rug. And the things that we become aware of, the conscious thoughts, are above the rug. But we have all this game and working that has let us live in this comfortable numb, that all of the decoys are hidden. We don't necessarily know they exist. So we call it self-sabotage. We call it imposter syndrome. We call it ADHD. We call it anxiety. We call it all these things and give it a broad label. If you can sit long enough with a subconscious thought and change the question. If you've been sitting on it for 3 days and you don't have an answer, how can you reframe the question? Change the wording. Ask someone else to workshop it with you. Can you reframe this question in a different way where it asks the same thing, but maybe in a different way? Or I asked my friends what they thought was in my way. I asked my friends, hey, what do you notice about me that seems like I'm stuck behind? Or something you wish I saw in myself? Or, hey, what's a belief that you think that I have based on what you've experienced of me? It was eye-opening. It was amazing, sobering, but I loved it. And if you ask what is actually true, and just get quiet, turn off the phone, stop trying to numb it all away, stop trying to distract it all away. You just sit with it. It's so uncomfortable, and I don't envy you for about what you're about to learn about it, but just sit with it. Sit with the emotion. Even if it starts out that I don't know what it means, but I have this weird tingling in the back of my shoulder. I have this uncomfortable tightness in my gut. Cool, you have an answer, write it down. You have a little bit to glean from and move forward with and extract more from. So I think stuckness is just a sign that you might actually be in the right place, and just you need a little bit longer. You need to reframe the question. You sit with the emotion, sit with the physical emotion until it becomes, or physical sensation until it becomes an emotion, and an emotion until it becomes a thought, and vice versa. They both reverse engineer. You have a thought. The thought is the language of the mind. The emotions are the language of the body. So when you have a thought and you play it out and you kind of choose which one. I used to do this with my son. Choose which one to believe. That thought you keep thinking, that's a belief. You chose which one to adopt. And then the chemical cocktails go, okay, we chose a thought that's sad. We're going to feel sad. Send all the chemicals to feel sad. And then your body, the sensations that you feel are low energy and fatigue and, brain fog, any of the things that'll come up. And the same goes for the reverse order. You can follow a sensation to find out what emotion's behind it, and then follow that emotion to find out what thoughts are behind it. It's an amazing thing if we'll sit and listen to ourselves more. We are really, really magical if we will give ourselves the time to show it and get past the tricks.
Yeah, I asked that because, that's where I see other people, myself included, and friends getting, that's the hurdle that they're trying to jump over, right? It's like, okay, I'm on my personal development journey. I'm trying to figure it out, right? What's going on in the mind and the body. And, you get to that thing that you've probably been suppressing for several years, you're feeling it, but then, you try to reframe the question, and then you feel that stuck. And then so usually I see people just end up giving up, because it's a lot easier to do that and try again another time, because like you said, right, sitting with the truth is not the most enjoyable experience, but on the other side of it is a lot better feeling, and also understanding, it sounds like, as well.
Yeah, 100%. To be authentic, you need safety. You need empathy. You need safety. You need to know that the truth can be exposed and you won't be attacked, vilified, or won't be weaponized against you. So if you don't feel like you can be honest with yourself, ask yourself where all the dangerous things that would prevent you from being that way are. Because some people do. They have a relationship that would completely crumble or come after them if they were to be honest with themselves. This is how the domestic violence cycle starts, is they know that to be honest about the situation would result in an unfavorable consequence, sometimes a detrimental consequence. So to be honest with yourself, you need to create a degree of safety that you can tolerate, to the degree and proportionate to the honesty that you can also tolerate.
On your path to this authenticity and this freedom, which is almost like this, mantra that you believe, and also being the happiest person that you know, what kind of insights did you learn about yourself, along that transformation journey?
I think the biggest one, the one that was the most profound, and a lot of women listening to this may be able to relate, is that I, in my early 20s, found myself looking in the faces of every single room I walked into for daddy's approval. I would scan for the micro observations. I was so quick at scanning everything, even the peripherals, for the attention or the validation or whatever I could garner from a crowded room. And that, being somebody who was adopted, knowing that someone gave you up, knowing that a male figure in your life gave you up, it's hard not to adopt this rejected orphan mentality, little orphan Annie shuffling in a bathrobe in the gutter. You just have this weird vision of yourself being this rejected person. And so I sought the opposite of rejection in every single person that I could, just to build myself up. My biggest revelation happened when I realized, in a relationship that I was going back to, that it had already fallen apart because I chose to be honest and it fell apart, and I was given an invitation to enter back into it, and I thought I could maintain honesty and still be attached to this person. So I went backward, using that word very intentionally. And upon the, we'll call it implosion, the second time, the slow implosion, that I realized that was not going to be this scenario, that in order to be attached to this person, a degree of inauthenticity was required. I had a visual of myself in the choice that I was aware that I was able to make. Because of the first iteration, there was 6 months between the first relationship and the second relationship. And I had learned enough in that 6 months apart. It ended up catalyzing as the awareness I had that it wasn't going to continue. Everything I learned, everything I became, being peaceful with myself in my own four walls, understanding that I could be whoever I wanted to be, and I didn't have to explain it or validate it or worry about how it was going to be judged or anything. I enjoyed that 6 months alone and thought I could be who I had chosen to be in the second iteration. And then we could live happily ever after. It was an amazing little concoction I hallucinated in. I had a vision going into the second one of this crossroads of me having to walk across the room with him on one side of the room and say maybe a 7 or 8-year-old version of me on the other side of the room. So me in my current state, I'm looking at two people. I'm looking at my kid, my little kid, little Kara, and this man. And I can walk across the room, but I can only walk across the room to one of them. And I realized that in that second iteration, that relationship I was trying to drum up, I would have to walk toward him. And that wasn't actually that painful. It was when I looked to the little girl and watched her face when she realized I wasn't walking toward her. When you face squarely the truth of your self-abandonment, when you face that and you see how you destroy your inner child that way, you will walk away from everyone and everything, regardless of their importance to you, all day long without condition, because you will never, ever look at that face again that way. You will never cause anything to come between you and you ever again. I almost had this vision of me scooping up this girl and like burying her in the tightest hug and apologies and love and validation. It was probably one of the most emotional moments I had with myself that I've ever experienced in my short 38 years. Because now I have an advocacy of like, that little girl lives on my shoulders loud and proud. And if you're not good with her, you're not good with me. And so anybody that would come between me, it's a very quick go fuck yourself. It's not a question. There's not a, but I've been out of a relationship for 2 years and he's really cute. And you know, we've already been dating for a while, and you don't negotiate. You don't say, but it's my dad. You don't say, but I've been married to him for 20 years. You don't say, but I know that he loves me. Does he cause turmoil on the face of your inner child? He's not for you then. Walk away and walk toward her or him.
Okay, so why should people be choosing their inner child over, it sounds like, literally everybody else? Can you help me understand that?
Because nothing else will sustain. Everyone else is a condition. Everyone else has the capability of walking away. Nobody else is a guarantee. You are the only person that's going to be in your life until you die. The only one. At the end of the day, it's an ugly truth. But your kids are not guaranteed. Your husband or wife is not guaranteed. Your parents are not guaranteed. Your siblings are not, your friends. They will all change, and they all are mortal, which means you could lose them at any point, as sad as that is. You have to be willing to walk away from everyone who causes conflict within yourself. Because to have peace with yourself is so much more valuable. When we have peace with others, but it costs war with ourselves, you will never be able to drink enough, sleep with enough, journal enough, medicate enough, therapize enough to get over that decision. It all is upstream or all downstream of that choice.
Yeah. And you have to sit with yourself literally every day, every second, every hour. So, like, if you're not going to even pick yourself, in every situation, then, how can you pick somebody else in situations that may not include you as well, right? It kind of reminds me of like you have to love yourself first to love something else kind of phrase.
100%. It's the airline mask all over again.
Yeah. And so you learned about, picking yourself, even when it's truly a hard decision to make. And so I'm curious, like, how did your belief, value, principle system change as you chose to pick yourself and live that life of authenticity and a life of freedom?
Well, for me, it was pretty all of a sudden. I got to see who she was, all those years of wanting to, you know, dance and sing and chase approval, and she just wanted so much to be loved. She wanted so much to be told how funny she was, how talented she was, how good she was. She just wanted to be a good girl. And when you're not choosing yourself, you're ultimately answering that question no. And then that little kid has to go run marathons for other people out there in the world to prove and validate and get that kind of be that people pleaser. You see those chronic people pleasers that have no identity of their own. That's because they've chosen they're not good enough for them. And so they're trying to get that. That's the people that are chronically on dating apps and chronically on, they're just never out of a relationship. They're switching jobs and climbing this and doing that. And even in a malevolent sense, they're using people, manipulating people, all trying to like position things to work out to where they're always on top or they're always insulated from rejection or failure. And it can be very, very, it can start innocently enough, but then it gets very, very destructive. And at the end of the day, you're not choosing yourself. That is the everything flows from decision, because it does have to do with your identity. If you're not a whole identity, you will use people and things for your whole life to try and fill where you left yourself, fill that hole. And honestly, even God can't fill that hole, because if you won't stand by you, you won't have any clue why a God would choose you, whatever belief the system you have. My personal faith is the sacrificial nature of Jesus. If I can't pick me, if I don't feel worthy of any of that because I didn't choose me, how could I ever accept the gift of somebody in the Christian faith, of somebody dying for me? I wouldn't be able to accept that. And so good luck living with this dynamic that I'm never worthy, and then not only in this life, but eternally unworthy. And, I shudder to think what would have happened had I not done that, because from there's just this a benign relationship with yourself. So self-talk changes. And from self-talk changing, perceptions of self change. So you really start to believe that maybe you can do that. Maybe you are capable. Maybe you don't know enough right now, but it doesn't become you're stupid. It becomes, how can I learn more? It shifts everything into growth mindset and possibilities, as opposed to defeatist. If I wanted to do something and there's nothing impossible for me, because it's like, okay, well, here's the skill set and then the knowledge and the things that I need to be able to do that. It's not, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not talented enough, and just beating the hell out of myself because I have a relationship with myself and I wouldn't talk to her that way. And she trusts me, so she's not going to talk to me that way. As silly and metaphorical as it sounds, it's very, very, very impactful for someone's life.
Yeah. That's so true, honestly. And I can see like the way you were describing that, I can almost see like my own life kind of like switching in that way of, and I also think that it's the people that you surround yourself with and the people that you talk to, or um even some of the people, I try not to put people on a pedestal. It still happens. I didn't even know it was a thing until I learned about it. But, there are people in my life that I did put on a pedestal, but their frame or their mindset was that it is possible. They asked you that how question. They weren't like telling you you can't do it, or, what if this, what if that, what if this, what if that, down pretty much to the ground. That they showed you that it truly was, you are capable of that.
Absolutely. Borrow somebody else's belief.
Yeah, that is true. And so I guess now I'm curious, like how, in today, on a week to week daily basis, like how do you maintain this state um of being, you know true to yourself and not, reverting back towards where you were. I feel like that's got to be, it's probably very easy to go back there. You probably don't want to go back there. I wouldn't want to go back there if I was you, but yeah, I guess I'm curious, like how do you maintain it and then almost like pull the little Kara back from, the house and put her back into reality.
Well, I didn't used to be able to maintain it as well, actually. There would be times where it became nothing more than the pursuit of happiness, is like the pursuit of making sure that me and this kid are aligned. And it was me trying to do things forcefully and all of that. So over time, I realized that it was nothing more than measuring the times that I have negative emotions. Because negative emotions indicate that our higher self and our current self are disagreeing about something. And that inner conflict usually indicates that we're not being honest about something. So measure, where I usually can follow it up to the event that I noticed I started feeling that way. And it was not saying something I should have said, or being asked if I was doing okay and saying, yep, when I was not. I was having an absolute miserable day. Or just any type of little things that it's like death by a thousand cuts to our authenticity. And rectifying those by going, okay, I acknowledge that and I make a path forward. What could be even truer than this? What could be a more truer and realized version of myself now than was yesterday? And having yourself that balance of truth and grace, not flogging yourself over the head when you had a crap day and you just stayed in a low state. Because there are some days I'm not in a good state and I know what it takes to get in a good state and I'm not willing to do it. I'm just going to go home. I'm going to go to bed. I'm going to go to bed a monster and I'm going to hope that everything just shakes out in the morning, and it never does. And you have to be able to laugh at yourself and go, I actually thought that was going to work in that state, that I was just going to wake up and not be a complete, curmudgeon the next morning. And it's like, okay, take the moments that you show up as anything other than yourself, address maybe what caused it with love and grace, and then make a conscious choice forward. And then I do integrate creativity, gratitude. I meditate all the time. I think meditation is the solution for damn near everything. And to meditate means to become familiar with. So if I'm feeling disconnected, most of the time it's a disconnection with self. So I will meditate with no music, no guides, no nothing. 5 minutes alone in silence and just see what happens. See what comes up. See what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling. And gently poke at all of those things until something is formed, until I'm more familiar with myself. I do 5 minutes. If I can't do 5 minutes, I'm dead, because I can always scrape up 5 minutes. But the simplest way I can put it is that your relationship with yourself will be like any other relationship. You will have communication blunders. You will have times where you don't understand, and you will need to ask questions in order to be able to attain that understanding. You will need to care for yourself as if you're someone you loved, whether you feel like it or not, and rinse and repeat. It is a full scale relationship just like any other. So when you orient yourself, even Jordan Peterson talks about this a great deal. Take care of yourself as someone you care about. He has a lot of others, and I think I've accidentally used and brought in some of his principles without even knowing it in his 12 rules for life. But one of his 12 rules for life that changed me a lot was take care of yourself as someone that you care about deeply. And if when it gets hard and fuzzy, ask yourself why. Why am I not wanting to care for this part of myself? And there are ugly little fuzzy gremlins inside of me that just they just want to watch the world burn and take the center part of the brownie just because there's parts of me that are just not very lovable. Why am I trying to deny love to that part though? It doesn't cost anything to give love to that part. And it's questioning, understanding, building the relationship, and taking care of yourself over and over and over and over and over.
Jordan Peterson does have a lot of good things that he says, and I like how you did mention that 12 rules book. I think that's on my list to read, and take care of yourself, like you care about them. Because truthfully, like that, I live by that law, and I'm trying to work on that because, if the way I talk to myself was the way I would talk to other people, I probably would have no friends, right? And so that is so true, and you're just hitting home with that one for me.
Well, that book is excellent, and I would highly recommend it because most of the things we talked about follow his principle, tell the truth, or at least don't lie. And that includes yourself. So I practice that. That's my if I had an alma mater or a motto for my life, it's tell the truth or at least don't lie. So one of his rules I literally live by.
That's fair. And I think that like telling the truth is so important, and so many people don't do it, right? Or they avoid it. We think of anything else to, do except that. We browse social media, we go for the dopamine hit, the instant gratification. So it's definitely something I've been working on my own journey. And so I'd love to get into my signature question, which is the question I'm going to ask every guest. It is the topic of happiness and life's purpose. You've obviously gone down the rabbit hole of happiness, and so it sounds like your purpose is really around, helping and guiding those people who have been through the trauma, the anxiety, the abandonment, the destruction. And so, how did you know that you had a gift in this space of helping others?
That's a good question. I mean, the easy answer would be to say I can feel what people are going through very viscerally. But I feel like that's any empath's broad brush answer that they give. It's like, I feel what other people's pain. It's like, okay, well, what are you doing with it? Good for you. Beyond that, though, it's similar to, Tony Robbins talks about, I've suffered and I've suffered greatly, and I don't want anybody else to feel suffering. And I can relate to that, but not to piggyback on his answer, because it's more than just not wanting suffering in the world. I experience in my own four walls, when I'm alone, I'm good. And I was very much not good. I was a very troubled, very upset, very angry, very disturbed girl. And I'm good. I'm in a really good place with myself. I enjoy my own company. I enjoy my life. And at any point in time, I hope it continues to get better, but if it never did, I'm still good. More so than not wanting people to suffer, and more so of feeling people's pain, I want people to know, or I want people to be able to experience that. And I've gone from darkness and suffering to this on my own. Medication didn't work for me either. Therapy didn't work for me either. Finding the relationships didn't work for me either. I didn't have a great life. I was left out on a doorstep. I was abandoned. I was left behind. I grew up in divorce and chaos and addiction and violence, all the things. And I sit here at only 30 something years old, and I'm really, really, really in a great place. And I did it. I did it. So anyone can. Anyone can. You don't go from suicidal to pretty much living in a really, really, really great, happy life, being the happiest person you know, and not share it and not figure out how to unlock everyone and see that in other people. I've been told, and it's probably some of the most humbling moments of my life for somebody to tell me that that's something's helped them and that something's unlocked something for them, or that they've done a practice and now this thing that they struggled with, they no longer struggle with. That is, I can't think of anything better to leave this life with than to know that somebody found something I experienced, like picked up a pebble that I left behind me and go, oh my gosh, that's going to be really helpful. And then it was. Like, consider me a fulfilled human part of the human existence when that can be said.
There is no better way to wrap up this podcast than exactly the last couple of sentences you just said. So, thank you so much, Kara, for being here, sharing your story. Where can listeners go to find more about you?
I'm pretty much everywhere. I make myself kind of accessible. I know the internet's a vast place, so I'm very Googleable, we'll say. I spend more of my time social media wise on Instagram because it's the one that I understand best. It has more images and all of that. But if you Google me and you find that my website's a safe place, it's got free practices. There's beginners meditations, there's inner child meditations. I created a website I'm very proud of because it's just somewhere you can go and find things you need, use things you need, hide out and learn and practice and connect. But then, for those that are social, and I'm very socially found, YouTube, TikTok, all the things.
What are the ats for your Instagram and your website link?
Kara Payton. It has a little underscore because apparently there's an original Kara Payton out there somewhere. But so it's KaraPayton and a underscore, dang it, because that wasn't the first. And that's everything. That's YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn. It's Kara Payton. Pretty easily found.
Perfect. Listeners, if you have any questions or comments or feedback, please feel free to DM me on my socials. And thank you so much for listening. Thank you very much, Kara, for joining me here today. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It was a great conversation.